All right, so we'll go ahead and kick off. I believe that gives us our entry point to today's conversation. I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Lloyda Williamson. Some points to consider. We've had some really awesome conversations thus far today. Obviously, after a tumultuous year of 2020 of trials and tribulations, and that's not just us adults. Very special conversation coming soon today, because as a young father, two young girls, I saw firsthand as to what the reality of the pandemic has done and can do, just for the overall mental health and stability of our young ones. But not only that, they have to get out of the house at some point and get back to school. So after a year of virtual learning, the transition back into a normal school setting may be difficult for many children, mine included, to cope with. This difficult transition period may lead parents to feel stress and concern for their children finding their way back into their classrooms. Not only will children face difficulty transitioning, but parents will also feel stress about keeping their children motivated to learn. Dr. Williamson will touch on how parents can help children focus in the classroom and how to support the entry back to in-person learning, in which we're all striving for in a safe manner. But then again, to the magic of today's conversation, Dr. Williamson is a professor and chair of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Meharry Medical College. She obtained her BS in Natural Sciences from Oakwood University and her MD degree from Meharry. She completed psychiatry and child psychiatry training at Emory University and is board certified in both specialties. She is a distinguished fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. Dr. Williamson has provided clinical services in private practice, community mental health, and academic centers, and has taught trainees in multiple disciplines. Her practice approach is holistic. Dr. Williamson's presentations in community and academic settings may include topics regarding spirituality, cultural psychiatry, and telepsychiatry. She provides psychiatric services at the Lloyd C. Elam Mental Health Center, such as psychotherapy, psychiatric evaluations, opioid maintenance treatment, and medication management. We have a sheer joy and pleasure to hear you today, to receive the information, the expertise, and the tips and tricks for us parents, uncles, and aunts. We thank you for being here with us. We look forward to it. The floor is yours, Dr. Williamson. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited to have had this opportunity to be here with you. This sounds like an amazing day. I'm sorry I couldn't be able to participate in it all day, but I consider it a privilege and an honor to be with you for this presentation. So thank you for the organizers and for your ability to celebrate this 85th occasion. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and let's start. All right, so how can parents help children become ready for the new school year? So this is the topic that we're going to talk about. So think about new school year. What do you think about? One of the first things you think about is that list that you get, the school supplies if you have young children, but even if you're thinking about high schoolers or college students, you're thinking about school supplies, right? So that's one of the first things. What are the other things? School clothing. Everybody looks forward to the new school year to get their new clothing or their new uniforms and see how they can style it up. But I had a flashback. I was thinking about school lunch boxes. There are different types that we had. These were some of the ones I remembered from the 70s. And then of course, we also had the brown bag. So these are some of the things that we think about when we're thinking about getting ready for the next school year. But what was important about our lunches was not just the lunch box, but what was inside the lunch box. And so as we talk about our presentation today, we're not just talking about the external preparation for our students, we're talking about what's going on inside. So the year plus months of the pandemic, there wasn't an aspect of our lives that was not touched. So as we think about our children and preparing to go back to school, we do recognize that there are some protective factors, and two that really stand out are social supports. This includes family, extended family members. This includes our friends, our children's friends, our friends that we share support with, as well as neighborhood resources, including sports activities, other extracurricular activities. These are protective factors for our children. But the pandemic affected every aspect of our lives. So things were shut down in terms of, activities our children prepared or participated in. And they had also affected the social supports that we experienced as parents, as aunts, uncles, grandparents, neighbors, community members. It affected everything. And so how did it affect us? And it's still affecting us. There's a lot of uncertainty. One of the biggest things that happened for our children is decreased socialization. So we were now at some points restricted to our homes, restricted to our neighborhoods, and not able to participate. They weren't able to participate in sports and dance and music and travel clubs, all of these things that they participated in. As a result, these things that they look forward to, their peers, they were separated from. At the same time, there were death of loved ones, whether it's grandparents or neighbors or teachers or coaches or church members. And so there was a lot of emotional distress and anxiety. And we all experienced that tension as parents, as we're experiencing the secondhand anxiety and emotional distress of our children. So specifically, let's talk more about our youth and what they were experiencing. Because of the pandemic, they had a lot of downtime. They weren't as active. There was a lot of screen time, not just for school, but a lot in terms of watching movies, being able to participate on social media. In addition to that, when they were doing school online, there's increased stress for many of our students in terms of having difficulty not being able to relate and have conversations in the same way, and having anxiety about how they're going to be able to perform academically in school on tests, particularly for students as they get older, high school, college. A lot of college students just weren't able to make it and decided it wasn't worth the stress and decided to put a hold on continuing college because of the stress of the pandemic and learning online. Food insecurities. So for many of our schools, in our resources, in our neighborhoods where they're depending on the resources for food, breakfast and lunch, those meals were not as available. Then as we think about how some children were not able to participate in online learning because they didn't have access to internet or didn't have computers or smartphones that were able to help them keep up with this new academic learning environment. So this placed many of our children and youth at a disadvantage. So as we talk about screen time, there was a significant increase in screen time for many of our children. Now, in some ways, this was helpful because some people thrive on this sort of learning environment. Some academic providers and educators rapidly adjusted to be able to provide their learning material online. And so that wasn't a challenge for them. Many other people participated in new hobbies or online activities. And so this was a benefit for them. On exercise classes, yoga, for example. There were also opportunities to participate more in terms of communication with social media and just on the cell phone. But for many of our youth, this was a distraction. Some youth with some special learning needs or perhaps psychiatric disorders, including ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, either hyperactive type or the inattentive type or combined type, autism spectrum disorders, it was very difficult for them to learn and has been difficult. Some of our youth have been struggling all along. Some physical experiences may have been more difficult with eye strain, just not being able to regulate their sleep-wake pattern, getting their being awake during the night and sleeping during the day. And then, of course, because of the online exposure to social media, there has been, for some children, more experiences in terms of bullying. So it's important for us to be aware of all of this, not just now that we've been going through, but that some of these things can continue as some schools may have some hybrid learning some in person, but continuing online. It's important for us to have discussions about how our youth, how our children are experiencing these situations. So, what are some other challenges? When we think about our educational system, we think about 91% of time, 91% of our students in the educational system have been impacted in a major way by COVID-19 with this online learning. Some school settings have been less structured. Others have been bored because they just haven't had as much activity or as much challenges by the online learning format. Some may have had difficulty playing outdoors and not being able to interact with their friends. Some of our younger children in particular may be more clingy as they have not had the regular interaction with friends and teachers and social skills. What we do know is that play is the work of children. And as our play routines have changed for them, some of them have had some negative impacts. But this can also affect adolescents as well as our young adults in college and university. Again, that's a big part of college experience in terms of the social aspect. And many of these things have been limited. International travel for school, all of these things have been impacted in a negative way. So there may be, as we think about going back into school full-time in person, some of our children who have been away from their school setting for over a year may have some resistance and some hesitancy, some anxiety, and perhaps even some down feelings or depression as we talk about going back into the school work setting. So the good news is that our children, our youth, our teenagers, our young adults are resilient. And so there are many factors that we can think about what contributes to the resiliency. Our nurturing and cohesive family environment. Whether or not you're in a two-parent home, whether or not you're in a single home, there can be love and nurturing with extended family members and friends. We do know that learning how and teaching our children how to adapt, nothing ever stays the same. Our world is constantly changing. And if anything, this pandemic has shown us that we can learn how to adapt. Sometimes it takes some thought and some ability to think about resources, but we can learn how to adapt. It's important to pay attention to our emotions and recognize that feelings aren't good or bad, but it's how we react to our feelings and our experiences that may make things more challenging. Being able to focus on things that support our self-esteem, paying attention to social media and realizing that everything on social media isn't necessarily good for our children, but there are some things that we can expose them to and connect them to that can boost their self-esteem. One of the things that has shattered our routines is the pandemic, but we can also establish new routines. Here we see a picture that perhaps the mom had a cleaning service in this home, or perhaps the mom or dad cleaned the home, but we can engage our children more in terms of participating when we might not have done that before. in terms of cleaning. So a well-functioning home, a well-functioning school, and well-functioning communities can assist our children and our youth in terms of their resilience. We also do know through some early studies about religion and spirituality, and yes, there is a difference between religion and spirituality. Religion is more like thinking about the example of individuals who are connected together with shared beliefs and shared practices in terms of a higher power or God, for example, where spirituality is more broad. What gives you a sense of purpose? And it may be connected to religion and it may not. We do know from early studies that some experience worsened mental health as their routines connected with religion and spirituality were disrupted. We do know that many people, including our youth, can turn to faith when they're experiencing a crisis and just trying to understand how our world fits together and what their connection is with the world. Early research also shows that those who practice positive religious coping, such as reading spiritual material, meditation, there's even been online and Zoom worship services. These have strengthened their faith and their spirituality during times of COVID-19. So we also know during the last couple decades, there's been a lot more research in terms of understanding of spirituality and mental health and the brain. There are some spiritual practices such as meditation that are linked to those positive neurohormones such as serotonin, dopamine, and those endorphins, whereas they also may decrease levels of stress hormones such as cortisol and noradrenaline. What we do know also is that the brain receives positive rewards when you are reading religious materials, and this happens for many people. So as we think about what our children need, it's also important for us to understand that we are models, how we cope with stress, how we deal with difficult times, affects and impacts our children. They are watching how we spend our time, how we eat. They're watching our own sleep-wake cycles. So it's important for us to model healthy routines for our child. What we eat, what we do in our downtime really matters for our mental health. Research has shown that people who have more regular daily routines actually have lower levels of distress when facing negative problems. So some of that rigidity and routines that we pushed against when we were growing up, and we've actually had our own say-so now, may actually bring that back into play, may actually not only help us, but help our children. Sometimes it takes a while to get some of these routines established. Some people can establish a routine really quickly, and others, it takes a while. But if it takes a while for you to establish that routine, and it's an important routine for you, don't give up, because chances are if you stick with it, it will eventually stick with you. So as we think about routines, it's not only good for us to have routines for ourselves, but it's also good for us to help our children learn how to establish a routine. So think about things that they do on a regular basis and choose one routine in particular, perhaps a bedtime routine, so they're able to remember how to get their things organized for school the next day, outline their clothing so they're not as rushed in the morning. These are some things that we can help them do. Encouraging them to change from and break some of those negative habits and develop some positive habits. Helping your child talk through the next day, what's coming up in the week, what exams do they have, what assignments do they need to turn in, and help them plan their day and plan their week. And then for some children who may have a particular difficult time, setting up a reward may be very beneficial. We all like rewards, and different children and different individuals respond to rewards differently. But rewarding them so that they know that they've done a good job, and that reinforces them to keep the routine going. For our young children, this might be something like an extra bedtime story with them, or even for our older children, even though we're not reading bedtime stories to them, connecting with them in some special way, sitting at the foot of their bed and just listening to them, not just talking to them, but listening to see what was important during their day, how they may have experienced some things negatively or positively, and just being aware of the things that they're going through. As we work to help our children establish new routines, it might be that it takes them a while, or they're not as successful as you want them to be or they want to be. But it just letting them know that it's okay, that they can get through this and you are with them means a lot. So one of the other things that we can do is help our children label our emotions. I think there are hundreds, thousands of words to describe our emotions, but often our children have not learned how to express them. So taking some time to sit and help them think through what they're experiencing, help them with some word suggestions, and help them increase their vocabulary can actually help them be able to cope with difficult situations or anticipated difficult situations as they anticipate going back into school. Children who are able to identify and talk about their emotions for about 20 to 30 minutes per week in a very supportive way actually demonstrate improved social, emotional, and school performance. So here are some ways to focus on wellness. Help our young people, our young adults, and even our children understand that there is purpose as they go to school, not just for their own education, but for them to know that as they pick a career or pick a job, they're contributing to society and that they have purpose in life. Help them to understand that as they attend school, they are being mentored by teachers and principals and coaches to be able to help them not just develop academically, but help them to be able to understand empathy, how to connect with people, so that when they need empathic responses, other people are going to be empathic with them as well. It's important to know that we all don't get things right. We're not perfect. One of the challenges with social media is that we see perfect images. And a lot of times our children and our youth, our young adults, and even us sometimes are seeing people and we idealize them and want to be just like them. And we feel bad about ourselves or have low self-esteem when we don't meet up to that expectation. So self-acceptance, helping them to be satisfied with who they are as an individual. There's no one else in the universe ever in times past or in the future that has the combination of gifts and talents and experiences they have. So helping our children to understand self-acceptance, being able to meditate, being able to take some deep breaths, being able to visualize calming scenes such as the beach or the mountains. Some places that our children have gone to can be helpful. Helping them to care for their body, helping to them to know that there's service to others, not just education for themselves. These are things that are important. Gratitude, no matter how poorly or no matter how disruptive our lives are, we can always be grateful. And then, of course, connecting with our Creator who made us through prayer is beneficial. So, what can we do? We can provide loving and nurturing environments, teach our young people coping skills, help them learn how to communicate, and teach them healthy habits in sleeping and eating. not just focusing on what's inside the lunchbox, but focus on what's outside the lunchbox, but what's inside the lunchbox, the content in terms of themselves. I thank you so much for your invitation. There's some websites here, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Mental Health America can provide you with some more information.
Dr. Williamson, thank you. I think I need another notebook. I took a handful of notes, and I think we're going to do some new things in the Smith household. In regards to the question, I did see one that was posted in the chat regarding examples or recommendations for teens. And I believe that was around the time where you were talking through routines yes. And also rewards that season of student may value.
So I'm sorry, repeat the question again.
Any recommendation that you might have for teenagers in regards to healthy routines throughout the day or evening, and then maybe some rewards that could be great for that seasoned student?
Right. Excellent question. So, with our teenagers, engage them in a conversation. So what sort of things would they like? Sometimes rewards are food or extra activities. If they have a curfew, maybe a little bit late for time out for curfew, or if they're not driving, being able to do some extra activities with their friends out in, of course, physically distant areas. We want to make sure that we're still aware that there is a pandemic going on. There are variants that are going around. For our younger children, also ask them, what would they like? So sometimes we have a tendency to make these big purchases, but you can't keep that up week after week. So if they're interested in quality time with you, going to the park, an extra bedtime story, engage with them about things that they're interested in. It's really challenging, but as they get older, helping them to understand that there is a purpose to those routines. There is a way that our bodies function better being awake during the day and sleeping at night. You actually grow more as an adolescent if you get enough sleep. Most of us, including adults, don't get enough sleep. So helping them to explain that investing in their bodies and good, healthy routines now can actually help their brain and their development and serve as a foundation for building blocks for success in their career, in relationships, and physically as they grow to adulthood.
That's beautiful. Look, we really appreciate your time. I know there was one or two more questions that we won't have a chance to get to in the chat, but on behalf of the Kappas, we really appreciate the work from Black Health Matters to the Black Health Matters family, to you, Dr. Williamson, thank you. I think because of your coaching and your talent and your time with us today, our students this year will find a most peaceful and a better transition to learning in person again. We thank you, we appreciate you, and hope we have a chance to hear from you again in the future.
All right, thank you. Look forward to it. Have a great day.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Okay, bye-bye.